Welcome to Page One, the award-winning show for writers with the reader in mind.
That draws the reader along, just like fiction.
Here's your host and producer, Zita Christian.
Hi everyone, welcome to Page One. I'm Zita Christian. I have the absolute joy and delight tonight to introduce you to a multi-talented, multi-published, prolific, fabulous writer of both suspense and romance. And she is a dear, dear friend. She's come down to Connecticut all the way from Vermont to be on the show tonight. Please welcome Carla Neggers. Carla, thanks so much for being here.
Oh, it's my pleasure. It's great to see you.
It's been a while, and I've followed your career, on Facebook, on the internet, with the publisher, and also with personal emails. And we always have the little chocolate that's for when you come to spend the night, which is wonderful. And it's really nice to get you to come down now because I know a very, very busy schedule. So I want to talk about some of the most recent books, but kind of to set the stage for everything. I was trying to think the other day, how many books now? It's over 60.
Yeah, it's over 60. And I always lose track of exactly where I am, what I've written, what I've contracted for, what I've got percolating in my head.
Because they're in process.
Yeah, but it is over 60. Yes.
Over 60 books, which is amazing. And I was thinking the other day about when we met. And I remember the writers' conference. We were at a New England writers' conference, and you were pregnant with your son, Zach.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and Zach is now...
He is actually just about to earn his master's in emergent media up in Burlington, Vermont.
So we go back a long way, which is wonderful. So I want to talk tonight about... a lot of overall things, but two series in particular. And first I want to start with the Swift River Valley series. So that one, we've got a couple covers here again, and tell me the title of the first book in the series.
It's called Secrets of the Lost Summer.
And give me an overview about that one.
All right. It's the first book in the series, and it's set on the west, in Quabbin area, which anybody from Connecticut is probably familiar with. And I grew up in that area, so I've had these stories percolating in my head for just so long, not even realizing it. But we have Olivia Frost, who's from this little town of Knightsbridge and goes to Boston as a graphic designer. And that's where she thinks she's going to be for a while, but she's always yearned to come back home to Knightsbridge. Sometimes you leave a little town, you never want to come back. She's always wanted to come back. But she gets kind of the little kick in the pants when a friend betrays her.
Yeah.
The friend you help get back on their feet, and then they kind of stab you in the back, and it's dramatic. So that's the kick she needs, and she comes back. She's bought this little house, this fixer-upper, historic place.
Everybody's dream.
Everybody's dream. She's going to turn it into a getaway, but the house just up the road from her is just an eyesore. The old refrigerator in the yard, the bed, mattress springs and stuff. So she finds out who the owner is and writes to him, thinking it's this old guy. Well, it's actually his son. And he's out in San Diego, and he's a hockey player and just happens to be this multimillionaire.
Yeah.
So he gets the note from her, and it's got a little picture. She's an artist, graphic designer, so it's got a nice little thing of chives on it, and he's trying to figure out, is it Clover? What is this? Who is this person? And he has no idea he's inherited this house from his father.
Oh, he doesn't know yet, right?
He doesn't know yet. So he finds out from her. So he's like, what's going on? So he comes to the little town, and it's all these little pieces that fit together, and it's the secrets of the lost summer. The summer it goes back to the building of Quabbin in the 1920s and 1930s, and a woman who had to give up her home. I mean, she was a teenager, and she created this little secret hideaway, and she has her secrets, and now she's in her 90s, and her story parallels Olivia and Dylan's story.
You know, you mentioned a minute ago about the Quabbin and the fact that people here in Connecticut are going to know, but people outside of Connecticut are going to see this show. So give us a little background about how all of that was created, because it's hard to believe for
really
people
is.
who didn't live it.
Yeah, it was during the era of many water projects around the country, but this one was huge in that it was at the time, you know, just about the biggest reservoir, man-made place, and they had to take 4 towns that were established, had been around for, you know, for a while, and get everybody out. So it's in the Swift River Valley. Like I say, it's where I grew up, and I obviously didn't grow up in these towns because they were underwater when I was growing up.
Yeah.
But they took them and over it just started. It was really decades. That's what was fascinating about doing the research is I had always assumed that this was a Depression era project, but it really wasn't. It was Boston was growing and needed water. Swift River Valley had water, and it was up from Boston, and so they could do water without. So they could just use gravity, and so they created a very long tunnel, basically, to send the water to Boston. And it's all complicated, but it's all this enormous engineering feat. So you have all this stuff going on at that time. But what do you do with the people in these towns? What do you do with people's homes? What do you do? How do you get them out? What do you do with businesses? Imagine, you know, if you have a little grocery store in Enfield or Prescott or someplace like that, and now your town is being disincorporated and flooded. Everything has to go. You know, how are you going to start over someplace else? It was hard times, and they already have a grocery store. You know, so what do you do? How are people compensated? I was fascinated by all that. I had grown up with people who had been displaced from, you know, into the surrounding towns from those valley towns, and they had to go. They didn't. It was you know, an eminent domain. It's one of the biggest eminent domain things in the
So
country.
4 towns are flooded to create a reservoir.
Right, they're flooded, and they Windsor Dam, and Windsor was the main engineer on the thing, and it's an amazing feat. Now I can remember as a kid, they don't let you do this anymore, but I would go to you know, I have 6 brothers and sisters, so we would go to Quabbin Park and roll down the bank. It's this really steep bank.
Oh yeah,
I
you
look
don't
at
do
it,
that now.
They kind of don't let you do that.
No.
So, but we would just down the bank and stuff. So it was just a great adventure for us. But I can always remember going up and looking at I mean, from the time I was a little kid, we'd go up in the tower. We would go along, just walking along, looking at the spillway and imagining the lives of the people in the valley before it was flooded, and what that must have been like. And we had pictures, and we met people. There would be people at school. There would be people, you know, at Girl Scouts and church and around the community who had come from this area or knew somebody did. So all those stories were along. And plus, I grew up on the western edge of the watershed and the reservoir, because the waters are protected because it is drinking water, and our house was actually photographed and almost lost. It's this 18th century carriage house that I moved into when we were 7. When I was 7, all the brothers and sisters. So I would climb up in a tree and sit up there, and I would be writing. You know, I always loved to write. And little did I know that I was looking out across the woods towards Quabbin. You couldn't see the water because of the ridge and stuff, but we'd look out across the woods, and Quabbin's on the other side. And I think that just fueled my imagination. So when I went to write Secrets of the Lost Summer and create this little town of Knightsbridge, it just felt so familiar and so real to me. And I've enjoyed.
Like you've lived it in your imagination already.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and even though I had no particular story in mind, something was percolating there, and that was very exciting to me. So when I write not only Olivia's story and her coping with a new beginning in her life, and then the love story and all the mystery that surrounds it, but also this Grace Webster story, who's this woman in her 90s, and she's been the teacher who never married, and has lived.
Yes, she's lived. We'll just say it that way. And she's entitled. I mean, everyone should have a story.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. But she lived through the flooding.
That's right.
Of the whole area.
Mm-hmm. She was a teenager, and she lived with her grandmother and her father. And they're very practical. One of the things I in reading about the people of that time and growing up with it was just the resilience. This was a really difficult thing. Imagine not only that you have to move, but you can never come back because your house now where you live is underwater.
Yeah.
And they moved graves. You can go now and visit the Quabbin Cemetery. Graves, monuments, all this stuff got moved. Most houses were just torn down, but some houses were actually physically moved. There's some I learned that are in Dorset, Vermont, up near where I live. Some beautiful homes. So everything had to, and it was all raised, and it refers to summer of 1938. And those of us in New England know that there was a huge hurricane that came in, and so that plays a role in the story too, and just this whole time period and how she created Grace created her little hideaway. She found an abandoned cabin, and she knew it was eventually going to be raised, and there's a pond, and when you go in Quabbin now, you're going if you can go fishing, and you can go over. I haven't done this, but my sister tells me about it, where you can go over and you can really feel where you're going over a former pond. Oh. So you have the flooded from the river and then the pond. So it's fascinating to learn more about all of this. But Grace creates her little hideaway, and she has her books and stuff. But here comes this stranger.
Yeah.
Who just may or may not be a jewel thief.
Yeah, and there's this lovely parallel of the past and the present, and the book takes place now, contemporary times. This is long after the flood. People people have created new lives, and
and you think about it as having beautiful memories and a beautiful place now, because Quabbin really is just an extraordinarily beautiful.
Do you hear from people because you're one of the things that you're known for is such a sense of New England. You create that small town atmosphere, and I think that's part of your thumbprint as a writer. But this one in particular, this series, because it's connected to an event in history, that there are still so many people now who lived through it, or their parents or grandparents lived through it. Do you hear from people? Do you hear from readers who comment?
Yeah, I do, and it's really it's terrific. It's really terrific. I've heard some stories, and there's a museum in New Salem, and there's they do these reunions. The Dana is one of the towns that was raised, and if you go into Quabbin, it's on the northern end of Quabbin, you can go to the Dana Center, you can walk there, and they've kind of kept it preserved. And they've now, I haven't been to see these yet, this is what I want to do as soon as possible, is to see, they put up photographs, so you can go and see that will show what the town, this Dana Center, used to look like. So when you're right there on the ground, I mean, you can find them pictures of these. And in fact, I have some. I put together a little video, 4 Secrets of the Lost Summer, but it's really for the whole series, the whole Swift River Valley series, because it was just so much fun to do. I pulled together pictures I had taken of what it's like now, plus the older pictures. And then there's this wonderful photographer in the town I grew up called Les Campbell, who allowed me to use some of his photographs. Nice. And it's just really, so you can get that on my website and really see what it used to look like, what it looks like now. And then just creating this fictional town and these lives and romance and fun and, hockey players and
it's wonderful.
Ice rinks and everything. It's just fun.
Well, now, Declan has a friend, and he's in the second book. So tell me about the second book. Tell me about the title and what that one's about.
All right. Now, That Night on Thistle Lane is really about Knightsbridge itself, less so about Quabbin and the history of Quabbin. So they're very contemporary books. They're a lot of fun, and there's a lot going on in them. But we have Noah Kendrick, who's Dylan's best friend. They went to kindergarten together and through school, and Dylan becomes a hockey player, and Noah he's just really, one of those guys who just...
He's so super smart.
Super smart.
Yeah.
He ends up at MIT, and he finds a company, an entertainment software company, and he just makes a fortune. So he's not just rich, as we were talking earlier. He's really rich.
Really rich.
But he's just a guy, and he doesn't like mosquitoes. And but he's a very good friends with Dylan, and he'll, he tries to support his friends. So he's going to this masquerade ball in Boston for a charity event that Dylan's arranged. He's going to dress up as a swashbuckler. He can do it because he's actually a fencer. That's his. In fact, Dylan's father, who's the one who bought the house next to Olivia, that with all the junk in the yard now,
and he's dead.
Yeah, and he was a little mentor to Noah and told him, martial art might be a good thing. So he's a fencer, and so he goes to the ball as a swashbuckler, never thinking, just do it, get it over with, right? Yeah. And but we have Phoebe O'Dunn, who's the town librarian in Knightsbridge, and her friend Dylan. Now Dylan and Olivia are together, and Olivia's going to the ball, and Phoebe's sister Maggie's going to the ball, and they don't have anything to wear, so it's like, so Phoebe says, well, she knows, she keeps it a little bit of a secret, but she's found a secret room up in the attic of her library, this little room, and it's just. Nobody's known it's there. She doesn't know what it is, but it's filled with these gowns, period costumes, and copies of Hollywood gowns. So there's one of Audrey Hepburn and one from Grace Kelly. And she says, okay, you can wear these. So her sisters, they wear them, and they don't know where it's from. They're thinking, Phoebe? Because Phoebe's she's the one who says, I'm going to stay at home. I'm going to be the librarian, and she loves libraries. She's not like, any kind of stereotypical librarian, but she does feel like her time for romance and a happy ending romantically is past. She, even though she's still very young, in her mind, that's what's happened. So she's not going to go to the ball because that's not what Phoebe does. Except there's this one little Edwardian gown that she can't resist.
Yeah.
So she sneaks into the ball, doesn't tell anybody. She just wants to go and have a good time and leave. And nobody's ever going to know.
But
she dances with Noah, the swashbuckler, and she overhears a conversation that, okay, maybe he has a stalker, and off we go. So it's just so much fun. I tell you, doing these dresses, researching, just gorgeous.
Oh, yeah. Now, this is a perfect segue because the show is page 1. So when I have an author on the show, I like to ask the author to read page 1 of the book. I'm going to ask you to read a little bit more than page 1 because I want you to go to, how about go like right about to there.
All right.
And so this is that night on Thistle Lane.
All right, chapter 1. Bumblebees hummed in the frothy catmint on the edge of the stone terrace, the only sound to disturb the hot New England summer afternoon. Phoebe O'Dunn watched a solo bee hover above a purple blossom as if debating what to do, then dart past the green-painted bench where she was seated and disappear across the herb and flower gardens. None of its fellow bumblebees followed. Phoebe had met on the terrace with her sister Maggie and her friend Olivia Frost to discuss the upcoming vintage fashion show at their small-town library, but inevitably talk had turned to the charity masquerade ball tomorrow night in Boston, 2 hours away. Maggie and Olivia were going. Phoebe wasn't, but she just might be able to help with costumes. The dresses would be perfect. If she'd had any doubts, they'd been dispelled when Maggie and Olivia sank into their chairs at the round natural wood table across the terrace and said they were stumped. With just 24 hours before they had to leave Knightsbridge for Boston, they had no idea what to wear. Phoebe did. She'd already had the dresses cleaned, and now they were hanging in the back room at her little house on Thistle Lane, just off the Knightsbridge Common. She hadn't mentioned them yet because, well, she didn't know why, except that she couldn't help feeling as if she were handling somebody else's secrets. She'd discovered the dresses 2 weeks ago in a mysterious hidden room in the library attic. So far, she hadn't told anyone about them or the room.
Oh, yes. So there's all kinds of wonderful stuff going on here. There's a little mystery going on. Yeah. Obviously, there's a romance. One of the things I love about your books, and we talk about writers having sort of a thumbprint of their work, And as I mentioned a minute ago, you do something with hometown New England, that makes the setting so real. And then when you put the people in it, I feel like your heroines are people I'd want as my friend, as my sister, as my neighbor. But one of the things I think is so cool about this series, well, I know there's more to come, but I certainly know in these 2 books, you have these, as we said, really rich, really rich men who have come to town. And on one hand, like someone might say, oh, that's not realistic. But it is the way you've set it up. It is very realistic how you've set it up, and I think that's great how you pulled that off.
Oh, thank you.
I want to switch gears here just for a minute, though, and talk with you about another series. Because while these are the beautiful romance, it's that heart and soul of the romantic relationship, you also write suspense novels.
I do.
Yes, and you have a series now, Sharpe and Donovan. And tell me let's see, there are 3 books so far, right? Or 2, and the 3rd one's coming out. What's the first one?
The first one is Saints Gate, and that's where we meet Emma Sharpe, who's an FBI art crimes expert, and with a special team based in Boston, and Carla Donovan, who's an undercover agent. And they discover they're both from southern Maine. She's from Heron's Cove, where her family are based as they're based. How can I put this? They're like world-renowned art detectives. Her grandfather's in Ireland, the family's in Heron's Cove, and Colin is from the fishing village, the little fishing village up the coast, and they meet over the death of a nun, and that's important to Emma because she happens to be a former nun at the convent and knew the nun that was murdered.
So that's the first one, Saints Gate. Then the second one, Heron's Cove, which we now know that's her hometown.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to skip quickly here and go to the third one, the one that's coming out.
Declan's Cross.
Summer of 2013.
Yep.
That's Declan's Cross. So.
And Declan's Cross, we find, you can tell by the cover, it's set in Ireland.
It's Ireland.
Yeah, it's totally Ireland. And remember, Emma's grandfather is based in Ireland, but they also have, she and Colin have this Irish priest in common as a friend. He's and he's in Rock Point, Maine, but he's allowed them, offered them his little cottage in the Kerry Hills of Ireland.
Now, you do a lot of your research in Ireland, don't you?
Yes.
You go there and spend time and write.
Yeah. I was there 3 times last year, so I love Ireland, and it's been a great place to learn more about, to do research.
Well, it's like absorbing that energy of the place, just like
Absolutely.
you did with the.
So the Irish part, it plays a role in Saints Gate, and then again in Heron's Cove, which actually has to do with a missing Russian collection of like Art Nouveau, jewelry and objets d'art and all that, but there's an Irish part of it. And then now Declan's Cross is actually set mostly in Ireland, and Emma and Colin are there taking a break, and they get caught up in an old art heist and an American woman who disappears. So it's great fun to write.
Now, I understand from just lunch conversation today, there's a prequel to the series?
There is. I've written my first e-novella original.
Nice.
So it's called Rock Point, and it's it'll be available starting this summer, July 1st. And oh, what fun to write. It's from the point of view of Finian Bracken, the Irish priest, who we learn in Saints Gate is he has a very tragic past where his wife and 2 little daughters were killed in a sailing accident. And then he becomes a priest. And so it's his story of how he leaves Ireland and comes to Rock Point. Oh, and there's a smuggler or 2 involved, and an Irish detective who plays a role in Declan's Cross.
I love it. It all braids. It's entwined together beautifully.
To do that, and I do have I have lots of characters and things going on, and it's very natural for me to do that. I come from a very big family, and I just love all that.
Is it necessary to read, like in either series? Is it necessary to read the books in order, or do they stand alone, or is it preferable to read in order? Any advice?
It depends on what kind of reader you are. I meet a lot of readers who love to read them in order. So Certainly, Rock Point is a prequel. You can read any time because you just can. But Secrets of the Lost Summer and that Night on Thistle Lane, I've heard from many readers who discovered the series through that Night on Thistle Lane and are now reading Secrets. Yeah. But with it, Dylan and Noah being such good friends, it's very easy to read them in order too. And then Saints Gate, Heron's Cove, and Declan's Cross. I think it would help to read
for those.
Yeah. But you don't have to. I try to make it so that you're not completely lost.
You know, I was thinking earlier that with more than 60 novels sold, do you remember the first one? Do you remember when you sold the first manuscript?
Oh my, yes.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Well, the selling was just so much fun. The market was just exploding at that time with short romances and romantic suspense. They called it. It was dead. It'll be back when pigs can fly.
Yeah,
so
right.
I said, okay, I'll try. I'll just see what I can do with romance.
Yeah.
And I literally sold 6 books in the first week. It was just. Boy, those were the days, huh?
Yeah, weren't they though? And unfortunately, we've only got a couple minutes left, and there's something I really, really wanted to ask you about. A couple months ago, you held a contest that had a connection to libraries. Mm-hmm. What was that all about, and who won?
Okay, it was the My Favorite Library contest, and I donated $1,000, a book collection, and a bunch of New England goodies to a library, and readers wrote in describing their favorite library, and the reader also gets goodies and books.
Uh-huh.
And it was just so much fun to do. Libraries were very important to me growing up.
Me too.
And then when I was particularly as a young mother, we could walk to the library and I'd sit there, with a baby and reading a book. Yeah. And so I loved libraries. And of course, in that Night on Thistle Lane, we have Phoebe O'Donnell as a small town librarian. Yeah. So the winner is a library in Cross Plains, Texas.
Yes.
Just a little library. It's a town of 982 people, mm-hmm. I'm told, and they've just been wonderful. They were so appreciative. They got a lot of their funding through donations, and they maximize everything they do with what funds they have, and they're just so can-do. I just really love it.
I have to say, I read on your website that it was, I think the gentleman's name was Bob Childress, and he talked about loving the little library because they did so much to encourage people to read. I mean, they could do a lot with a little. Very, very resourceful.
And I read that, in all the submissions, that's what I kept hearing from people who loved their libraries, was just how dedicated the staff was, how dedicated the volunteers were, to just using what they had and maximizing everything. And libraries are just such a great place to discover new writers and go from there.
And Carla, in 30 seconds, any advice for new writers? Because we have a lot of them out there.
Oh, I know. It's so much fun to write. I think my biggest advice would be just to write what you love.
Yeah, I think that's good advice because it takes a long time. You better like it.
Yeah.
So listen, I'm getting the signal, and I want to thank you very much for coming down and being on the show tonight. So my guest, Carla Neggers, more than 60 novels, romance, suspense. Definitely got to check her out. And I also want to thank my crew, and I love to close with the words of the fantasy writer Ursula Le Guin, who said, "There have been civilizations that did not use the wheel, but there have been no civilizations that did not tell stories." So find your story and find a way to tell it. And do join us again next time. Thank you.
Food for the crew and guests is provided by Manchester Grill of Manchester, Connecticut, and Angelo's Restaurant of Glastonbury, Connecticut. We welcome your comments and suggestions. Please email Zita at zitatv.com or write to Zita Christian, Page 1 TV, P.O. Box 1515, Manchester, Connecticut 06045-1515. You can watch this and other episodes of Page 1 on youtube.com/Zita3x3.